All right, everyone. Welcome to the show. Today we have a special guest, and we're going to be talking about how to train your brain to make more money. Business Mindset 101. I said special guest because I don't know how to actually pronounce your name.
I'm
So,
very special. I like that. I appreciate it. Vanderhoek, Mark Vanderhoek.
Mark Vanderhoek, is that Dutch or something?
It is.
Wow.
Yeah, fancy.
Are you Dutch?
1/4, of course.
Nice.
An American. So I
Nice.
We're all American.
know.
Well, thank you for coming on the show, Mark. Are we
Oh, my
definitely
pleasure,
live,
man.
Joe?
Yeah, we're live.
Are we definitely live?
We're definitely
All
live.
right. I
Awesome.
see it on YouTube. It's really happening this time. Welcome, Mark.
Cool.
So, for those who don't know, I've known you, I guess, professionally for the last few years. We've been doing Kindle together, swapping, exchanging books. But this is actually the first time I've talked to you live, or 2 days ago was the first time.
Second time. Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, for those who don't know you, would you mind giving us a bit of an introduction on, how you started doing online stuff, your life leading up to that, the whole thing?
I'll give you a very, very brief one. And if you want to extrapolate on anything, I'm happy to, right? Basically, I used to run a wood shop of all things. I used to build custom furniture. I've done a lot of different things. An artist. I've always done a lot of, you could say, personal growth work, And basically, I'd worked with my body for so long that my body was like, this isn't really working. And I got into a situation where I was tired of working for other people. I'd always worked for myself. And I really wanted to make a lot of money. And in my mind, I was like, I should be making $20,000 a month. I was just like, that feels like where I should be and where my peer group is at, and that would be good. So I was like looking online, and Kindle popped up, and people who were looking into that. And so I got started with Kindle, and that was probably 5 or 6 years ago, and here I still am, And parallel to that, I've done a lot of work on myself or whatever, initially to get over my own blocks, my own challenges, but then more and more, you want to share, because you begin to become aware of things. And so then I got into more and more coaching and working with clients, basically helping them overcome the kind of things that I had to overcome,
I want to say something before. I know Mike probably has a pressing question, but something just popped up in my head when you said you were, working on yourself a little bit. We had someone join our group today, or they probably joined a week ago, the Elite Fleet, who was actually very successful in their own right, but they were looking to get into Kindle, but they already had a successful blogging business and actually a big exit that they sold a blog for. And I found it kind of fascinating that they had told us that they kind of needed some emotional support, like you said, they had blockages getting into a new thing. And so I just thought it's kind of interesting how that can happen even when you deem someone successful. Their mindset, their frame of mind getting into online business especially can be your best friend, or it could be your biggest deterrent. And I just found that interesting that we had someone join that was already successful and was clearly expressing that they had that issue to us.
Would you like me to comment on that?
Yeah.
I think the thing is that, you don't know what's going on in somebody else's head, right? And success can be measured in a million different ways. The purpose of what we're talking about today, for the most part, is going to be around business, right? But in my experience, it could be any area of your life. And ultimately, the way to deal with it, in my experience, is really the same. But, and also it's a matter of what is somebody's expectation for themselves? Where do they see themselves? Like what Tony Robbins would say, what is their blueprint for themselves? And then where are they? If their blueprint is, hey, I should be making 5 million a year, and they're only making 1 million, they might feel like a total failure. If their parents are making billions, they might be like, oh, actually, I have a friend of mine, or a friend of the family who, it's a true story. His brother sold his company for 10 million, years and years ago. One of his uncles is a cardinal, literally a cardinal, in the church, I guess if you're religious, that's a big deal, right? His family owns mines, they own mines. And this guy's, he's probably making 500,000, $1 million a year, and he feels like the underachiever, yeah, I could think of more. I have a funny story, but I don't want to get off track.
No, I just find it interesting that, yeah, I kind of agree with what you said. I think realistically, everyone has kind of a blueprint in their head as to what they feel like they can achieve, or really the barriers in which they can go to. And for some people, they're maybe really good at doing one thing, but when it comes to embarking on a whole new task, then they kind of have to go up against those barriers. And so, yeah, even if they're really successful in one area with one particular thing, it may not carry over to them being like, yeah, I can absolutely crush doing this other thing.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm just going to go ahead because it's kind of what we had talked about initially, right? Where I come at it is that for the most part, we've totally just been conditioned. That doesn't mean and so what most people are doing, the analogy that I mentioned to you earlier is if you imagine everybody has a layout to this, their house blueprint and layout, what we're taught for the most part in the Western world, is, okay, well, how do you maximize the layout of move the furniture around to get the most out of it? How do you organize your time? What tricks are you using? What strategy are you using? Whatever, but if you go back to this analogy, if you have this layout, and what I said before, imagine in that layout, one of the hallways is only a foot wide. I don't care how many strategies you learn, that's going to mess you up. That room is going to be cut off. So, and if you take that to what we're talking about, you can have all this conditioning, and for the most part, it's working well for you. Everybody's here for some reason. They have some ability in this area, but everybody also comes up against that 1 foot wide hallway. And that's when people end up sitting down in front of me or realizing there's something, I don't know what it is, it's just not aligned. And that's when you have to look deeper. Nobody would do the kind of stuff that I do if they didn't have to, right? Because it does mean being a little uncomfortable, looking at what is this blocking me? Why isn't this working? But I will say that ultimately, in my experience, it's always logical. You always break down that people act logically from the references they hold inside. And I've never worked with somebody where it didn't end up making perfect sense why they were dealing with whatever problem they were dealing with. It's always very clear.
So if I could take it back to when you were doing Kindle, you started 5 or 6 years ago, and maybe you didn't have the results that you wanted to have at a certain point. What do you feel like your blockages were that were preventing you from it, and how did that actually translate into you, say, just putting out more books? You know what I mean? Where do we draw the connection of the mental to just literally taking action?
Okay, I mean, there's a lot in that, right? But I would say the way I try to work is 2 ways. Like I was saying earlier before we got live, in my view, each one of us is the golden goose. You want to put as much work into the golden goose as possible. I mean, I imagine a lot of these people who are follow Tony Robbins. He's sort of the best well-known, also the most Western kind of take action, make it happen, and he's always you got to keep improving yourself, right? So on the one hand, I'm always working on, whether it's doing kind of deeper work or whatever to improve myself. But at the same time, obviously, I want to learn as many tips and tricks and strategies. And I work hard. My assumption is that everybody works hard. If you're sitting here watching this, you're working hard. To me, that's never the issue. It's of course you're working hard. Of course you get up at 5. I mean, if you're not doing those things, that's the first thing to start doing, obviously, is start putting in the hours, putting in the time, But for me, I would say my main thing would be I basically, without going, I mean, I don't mind going into it, but I don't want to waste time on what's not really necessary. But because of my own associations and conditioning and what I grew up and what I saw and just stuff that's going on subconsciously, I had incredible anxiety doing anything work related, right? And it would be well, I'm anxious. Doesn't, I would be oh my God, I would be able to see it perfectly in my mind. I know what I want to create. Got the education. I think I'm pretty well spoken, friendly, whatever. But when I would sit down, I would suddenly feel like I was on fire, couldn't focus, and I still do it to a degree, but it's like, it's much transformed, So, when it was the hardest, it just meant I had to work that much harder, and it's not like you're going to let anything stop you. You work through whatever your issues are, and you do your best to make peace with where you are. That's also important, I think. But at the same time, you don't let go of your vision, for where you want to be. Like, you don't give up. At least that's me. Like, I was never gonna, working for the man is just never an option. Not gonna happen.
So I'm saying, what do you think you changed mentally, and like, what did it actually allow you to do more? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, you might get a deeper answer than you're looking for, but it's the answer, So what I did is I basically had this gets right to what the heart of the kind of stuff I do, right? Let's put it like this, like, all of us are different. We've all been totally conditioned different. Let me give you an example of somebody I worked with. I think that might be the best way to illustrate it, right? So I worked with this guy, basically was busting his ass trying to make Kindle work for himself. And he actually really was also into working on himself, so he was up for it. So he was actually great. Like, we did like a 5-session deal, and he basically kept on failing. Things weren't working, whatever. And I was like, okay, so what are your references? Like, what does this remind you of, right? Because when someone comes in with a problem, let's just say someone shows up and is like, I'm having trouble with Kindle. I have difficulty, I already know this is not the first time they've dealt with this in their life. Okay, it's not about Kindle. This is a deeper pattern, right? And so in this guy's case, he'd gone bankrupt like 3 or 4 times, he had, and of course, I'm like, okay, and what does that remind you of, right? Long story short, when he was a little kid, he saw his parents struggling for money constantly. Very difficult, right? Interestingly enough, you talked about how people have different areas, right? At the same time, beautiful family. Kids loved him, great relationship with his wife, all that was amazing. Not surprisingly, his parents really loved each other. You know what I mean? His parents were really there for each other. So it's a perfect example of like, we're not, I hate to say like monkey do monkey, or monkey see monkey do, but we really are programmed in my experience, So for me, I did a lot of work to break these bonds when I was a kid. And just to be obvious, like, I love my parents and they did the very best that they could with what they knew. Your parents can't give you anything that they weren't themselves given, but there was a lot of fighting around money. There's a lot of anger around money. In my, I was going to say pea brain, but in my 3-year-old brain, ultimately I sort of was like, okay, so obviously it's not safe to have a lot of money and to deal with money, right? Like a 3-year-old's logic. So consciously, I was like, I'm going to have tons of money. It's going to be amazing. I'm never going to deal with stuff. I'm never going to fight with money. My life will never be hard, right? But that's not how our brains work. So when I began to get into being, out of college and dealing with things professionally, I was like, why is nothing working? And it took me a long time to get to the bottom of that, because it might sound simple and easy when I say it like this, but it's always easy to see other people's problems. But to see our own is very, very challenging because we're in it. And to us, it's normal. It's our normal view. So it's gotten progressively better and better and better, as I've more and more basically broken that conditioning or shifted, you could say, my relationship to money, shifted those references in my head.
So let me ask you, like, how, with that one particular person you were working with who was doing Kindle and it really wasn't working for them, how were his difficulties around money? Like you said, he got it kind of from his parents, repeating their patterns. How did that actually manifest into why he was failing on Kindle? Because at the end of the day, if you think about it, Kindle is kind of like, there is an art, it's a bit of an art and a science, but at the end of the day, if you plug the right stuff in, you're going to get the right stuff out. So was it kind of a situation where he knew what to do, but like he literally just would sit down and, like you said, he couldn't do it because it was like he was on fire, like you said? Or was it?
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody has a different a different something, but it's sort of, I don't remember what the exact, but I'm sure you guys have seen a million times, you can lay out for people the exact steps of what to do. Some people, they're just going to like fly right away and crush it. Other people, you're going to be like, dude, I just told you.
Yeah.
And they're just, and what I would say is that, I don't believe anything's impossible for anybody. If you can imagine it for yourself, you can create it. But I would say we're more or less well adapted or aligned with various outcomes. So I don't know exactly what his deal was at this point, but I will say that let me give you just a little bit of a different example in a different area that might illustrate a little bit. Like imagine somebody that is wanting to get into a relationship, and they know, oh, you just got to show up and be awesome and have confidence in yourself. And a woman's going to be, or a guy or whatever, is going to be like, wow, you're awesome. I'm awesome. Let's be awesome together, So, but let's say that you're that guy or that girl and somebody shows up for the date, whether you're conscious of it or not, but if in the back of your mind, your subconscious, oh, that guy burned me. Oh, that other fucking asshole cheated on me. Oh, oh, my parents hated each other. If that stuff is what your references are, that's going to come through in how you show up, whether you want it to or not. You can only muscle, like I said, you can only move the furniture around so much. You know what I mean? And in my experience, it's the same thing. If I have somebody show up and be like, oh, I keep on getting relationships, don't work for me, whatever, I already know that what they grew up with was not perfect, in one way, shape, or form. I never know. I don't know ahead of time what it's going to look like, but I know that nothing comes from nothing. There's always clues. There's always a pattern involved.
Are you familiar with the reticular activation system?
Mike, repeat that. Sorry, because there was some sort of sound issue.
Reticulated what do you call it? Yes, I am.
Reticular activation system. What you're saying kind of reminds me of that. So I don't know if I'm doing a good job summarizing. Yeah. So the reticular activation system is really, we see the world around us, and it's more so about what we're focusing on, because there's so much input all around us, even just right in front of you right now. Like for me, I'm focusing on this conversation right here. And when I'm in this conversation, I am not noticing any other part of the room, anything else that's going on, because I have to be, putting my energy into this so I can, give the best dialogue possible, have a good conversation. And so if people have essentially their mind has been conditioned in a way to always look for negativity, or they're not aligned to kind of look for success, then whatever instructions you give them, whatever they're supposed to do, they're probably not going to do it well, because they're going to be conditioned to find the negative in it rather than find a way forward.
Right. And what I'm saying, it's not because there's anything wrong with people. That's the other thing. It's just a matter of what is your programming. Like you can sit there. I mean, ultimately, that's the issue with people with, you could say PTSD or something like that, right? People aren't dumb who've gone through traumatic stuff or whatever. It's just that you're trying to focus on one thing, but this other stuff is like screaming in your ear, because basically things have happened that had a big emotional component to them, right? And the bigger the emotional component, the more importance your mind puts on it. And also recognize, and this might sound like this is far afield, but really this is what runs people in my experience. Your mind's job is to protect you and keep you safe, right? So ultimately, if you were brought up in a situation where the association to money, and I don't mean everybody's like, oh, well, having a lot of money would be great, right? But the real association, like your parents, they loved their job. They loved working. The relationship with money was awesome and abundant. They gave a lot of money away. And when they had money, it was just like, oh my God, we're so blessed. And hey, you have some money, because money is so easy to get. If you're brought up with that kind of ease in some fairy tale family, right, then you can see how that person, I'm not going to say can effortlessly create more, but they're totally aligned and supported. As they're doing it, the little messages, subconscious, are being like, this is easy. This is no big deal. Everybody, it's great. But imagine the opposite, that you were brought up with money doesn't grow on trees. You got to work hard. You got to, you're trying to focus and do your thing. At some level, that stuff is affecting you.
Yeah,
I mean, you can talk in generalities. It's, it's difficult without something specific, but there's always a pattern. Is what I'm saying.
Joe, we having a sound issue?
No, it was just that one thing
Okay.
when you said reticular activation system.
No, you took off your headphones, so he was like,
You were like,
No, I heard something around. I heard something outside.
We were talking about,
I heard something outside.
yeah, the reticular activation system got messed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, to me, like that type of thing reminds me most of, say, like professional athletes like Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan, right? Where their reticular activation system is so focused on getting that job done and getting that point. They may be surrounded by 5 guys, but their mind, everything is so focused on getting around them and getting the ball to the hoop. And then they can make spectacular things happen just because of how focused they are. And obviously that carries over into their training because they're still focused on that one goal. So you can say, what they did was they went left and they went right and this and that. But in reality, it's just that they've trained themselves to be hyper aware of those opportunities. And so therefore they're taking advantage of every moment that comes in order to get to their goal.
Yeah, I think it's easy actually it's easier to understand what you're talking about, Mark, in the context of what you said about going on a date or in a relationship.
Right.
Because yeah, you are going to be acting a certain way based on your past experience like you described. Now, what I was thinking that when it comes to Kindle, it's more straightforward. But you're right that with any of this online business stuff, there are steps that you need to execute. And if you sit down to do those steps and in the back of your mind, you have something saying like, oh, this is not going to work. Like something like that. Yeah, you're not going to do them well, or you're not going to get through them in a timely fashion to get to the point where you start to see that it does work a little bit. And then you can say, oh, wow, it's working a little bit. And then keep going.
Right. I mean, what I would also say is that, and again, we just recently met, right? But like you strike me as, I think that obviously you're teaching a program, right? Like I don't want to say it's super easy, like everybody works hard, but this kind of work comes relatively naturally for you. I think you're pretty aligned to do this kind of stuff. Like you can follow the steps, Speaking for myself, I know that there's still days where it's like, you just get overwhelmed. I don't know what to do first, right? And that's not because I'm dumb, it's not because there's anything actually even wrong with me. It's because there's some of that still. I mean, trauma might be a big word, but like there's still that references that at some level, like it's not safe to do really well. It's not safe to be successful. Like if you're really making a lot of money, you're going to get hurt or you'll be exposed or whatever. It can be a million different things, but that shows up as like interference. Right. So, yeah.
So let me.
I would say for us, at least me speaking, like going through, the last 5 years of getting to the point that we're at now, I can trace back a lot of things that we tried to do that didn't manifest, either being because, for one, we did not put all of our focus into it until it started to work, or we got in our own way because we feared the consequence of what would happen if we got to that point, in terms of like, oh, things will get too busy, or, all the problems that we would encounter if we got to a certain goal, rather than just getting to that end goal and then just dealing with those problems later. I think a lot of people do that as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at success and different strategies. And, I would say in my experience, everybody's in a different place. So different tools are going to be the right tool for them at the time, But some of what you're talking about, some of the stuff I do also is, like meditation, obviously, putting myself in the place of already having achieved my goals, already being there, already, feeling that I've already achieved it, being in it, that's something that can be very effective also. But actually, I want to say something about that guy that I was talking about, right? With the guy who with all the bankruptcies and the difficulties. So what's interesting, and part of the way that I worked with him, is that he also happened to be like an all-star baseball player or something, you know. And he had a lot of very positive situation in his mind of being amazing as a baseball player. So what I actually did is we went into some of the quote unquote failures and that experience and the emotional charge of it, right? Of like, oh, right. And then suddenly, like, I put on the music that he had played on the bus when they had like won the states or whatever. And suddenly he was like, and he felt amazing and he felt totally in his power. And I was like, all right, take that energy, feel that amazing. Now I want you to send that to your business, right? And that might sound woo-woo or whatever people want to say, but it's really just about shifting the conditioning. And suddenly he began. And so then I'm like, well, how bad do you feel about that bankruptcy? He's like, oh, that wasn't that big a deal, you know? So little by little, you're wanting to sort of, you could say, dissolve or transmute or release the emotional charge around some of these, you could say, negative connections that we might have with success or with money or, you know, or whatever, wherever the block might come from, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we actually got an interesting comment. We usually don't address comments until after the show, but this one's interesting. Nadex77 says, I think Mike is going over both of your heads and you can't relate to it all. Mike is on another wavelength. Mike's on self-help, holistic concepts, but you two are on make money online. I don't know if you meant to say Mark. So. I don't know if you meant to say Mark.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, we're the two that are talking
well,
about.
I'm trying to bring it back to make money online. I'm doing my best.
Yeah, this is clearly a make money online channel.
Yeah, which
so,
is,
right,
which
you know,
is
we
totally
could talk
fine.
about.
But I mean, ultimately, but I will say, I didn't get into this stuff. Nobody gets into self-help because they're like, oh, it'll be awesome. I can't wait to look at my belly button all day. You know, it's like, I want the stuff. It's just when you want stuff and there's blocks, you have to start going down roads you start figuring out how things work, you know, not to be like, look what I know or whatever, but just to be like, I had nowhere else to go. You know, I wanted to be successful and I had blocks in my way. And, you know, it makes you, it makes you face stuff, you know, like, it's actually funny. Like, I used to make this joke that like, all everyone was a bunch of hot chicks in a hot tub, you know, which is not what I wanted, but it was my way of being like, I've had a lot of resistance to looking at the deeper stuff myself, to be honest. It's really, I just wanted to make money as well. That's my point. You know?
Yeah. I think if we bring it back to the nature of the universe stuff, whether you're trying to achieve some sort of higher self or if you're trying to make money online, you're almost taking the same thing. Yeah, it's the same exact thing. You're taking the same steps, but towards a different end.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, it's all, you know, like people have judgments on like, oh, they just want money or whatever. It's like, you know, this might get too far afield, but in my experience, we're all just here having an experience, you know, and the ultimate, you could say, power or self-realization is being, you know, we're creators, is to create what you want. And to me, wanting to create an online business is that's as legitimate as, you know, I actually have a lot of judgments when people are like, oh, I just want to help everybody. I'm like, that's your program. You know, that's what you were patted on the back for, was, you know, being a saint or whatever. Like, you know, I think the ultimate power and the ultimate self-realization is being able to say what you want to do and being able to create it or manifest it in the world, whatever that might be, whether it's a relationship or a successful business or, you know, whatever.
Well, bringing it to the practical for a second, it's kind of difficult to help anyone in the modern world without any money or anything of your own. Because then, I mean, really, you can maybe help them emotionally, but
no, but absolutely. And I mean, you know, the famous thing, again, popularized by Tony Robbins, but, you know, like they say in the airplane, put the oxygen mask on yourself first, you know, and then you can have something to offer the people around you. And honestly, in my experience, not to get too far, whatever, but like, as you become more and more realized, you literally are more powerful, you could say. You literally are more grounded. You literally have more to offer and can affect people more powerfully. As opposed to when people are trying to, like, often if you're putting other people first, you're trying to get something back. It's really not selfless. You have something you want out of the deal.
Exactly. And all these people that are, saying, I just want to help people, or they have all these superfluous goals. In reality, they need to be getting their income from somewhere. So to me, this is like the baseline for whatever, views you have of reality and grand goals that you want to achieve, whether it's, associated with money or not. If you can't create power, and not power, but if you can't create influence for yourself by generating your own income, then how are you supposed to do anything?
Yeah, you got to start with yourself. There's a reason that they say, what is it, like, think globally, act locally, but I would say act really fucking locally. Like, you heal yourself, and this again, but like in my experience, you shift yourself and your whole world will shift. Your whole world will change. That includes your business, that includes your relationships. That's just my experience.
Yeah, and I think the one that is shifting all these things around you, again, you have to be the one that is, like, giving value. Like, there's nothing wrong with people that have jobs, but they no, seriously, I
really judge them, but yeah, no.
I don't want to make it seem like I'm poo-pooing on people that are employed, obviously, but if they want to be, giving back to people, in reality, someone that is employed is taking resources for the most part.
Well, what I would say is that, again, it's all about, like, I'll be honest, like, I think it's a great gig. Like, if you were brought up in a situation where, like, your parents, like, were really, really happy working for somebody, like, they're taken care of by the corporation or whoever, they don't have to worry about that stuff. Their main goal is just to have a happy family, to have a loving, like, that's their big goal. I used to be judgmental of that, like myself, and I'd be like, oh, that's lame. Like, you should want to, I don't know, dominate the universe, but then I began to be like, dude, that would be awesome because this is hard, but I think it's a matter of what are you suited toward, for me, I don't think it is, but
at all.
Yeah, but for me, if people are here, I would venture to guess at some level they have felt trapped in the past or limited. You know what I mean? And so they're wanting freedom, obviously. It doesn't take a rocket science, rocket scientist. So, we can all kind of move the needle on our personal self, our personal journey, but we're not necessarily going to completely reinvent our personality in this lifetime, so you work with what you got. And personally, I think working for yourself is where it's at. But I know a lot of people that are super happy, working for other people, and that's great for them.
I wouldn't say that there is a little bit of a sound issue. I don't know what's going on, but it's kind of weird. But I would disagree, Mac. I wouldn't say someone that works for someone else is taking resources in a way, and someone that's working for themselves is not taking resources. I think.
Well, I'll finish your point.
I don't really know.
He's gonna walk his way back on that one now, but yeah.
No, I don't really know what the true nature of it is, but at the end of the day, I think we're all born into a system, and whatever the system is, and we don't really want resources like money. We don't really want money. Like, we want, like you said, Mark, we want freedom. We want the things that money can give. The means to it are almost irrelevant. I think what's more important is like what you do with it once you have it, not only for yourself, because you can be a professional athlete and just waste it on 10 cars or whatever, but for others as well. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if it's a matter. I kind of question whether in today's the system we're in, if it's even a matter of if resources are even a real thing, because I feel like we have like an excess of resources.
Well, I'm kind of paraphrasing Robert Kiyosaki, who would say that by being an employee, you are taking up resources, because that as an employer, you are giving jobs to people, and that's why you get tax breaks and stuff. On the other hand, as an employee, you're taking, and so I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm just relaying it back to the point where, this doing what we're doing now is a form of giving.
Absolutely. I mean, rich dad, poor dad guy definitely has a perspective and something to offer, but he's got some pretty extreme views, personally, I would say, in certain areas, anyhow.
Let's get into it. Like what?
Honestly, I couldn't quote you on what they are. I've just watched his stuff and been like, I think he doesn't own any stocks. I think the stock market's awesome. I think it's a lot of fun. I've done pretty well, I'm just saying is that I think everybody has a different perspective based upon where they're at. And some teachers are going to speak to some people in different ways. He's one where I definitely agree with, I like the whole setup, and not that it's meant to be a setup, but what he talks about as far as what he learned from his two fathers, it's very true. And it actually plays in a lot with what I was talking about, with the idea that, he had the benefit of two, and he was in a certain position where he could then weigh them and look at them. If he was only with one, he might never even question and think this is just how the world is, and in my experience, that's where most people are. They were brought up in their own little fishbowl, and they believe I'm right, and not because they're dumb or whatever. It's because that's all they've ever seen. And you talk about, what do they call it? Whatever. Everything they bump into just seems to reaffirm that opinion. They hang around more people who say the same thing, and you get total tunnel vision,
Yeah. And that's ridiculous.
Right.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting that.
Are you having that audio issue, Joe?
Yeah, definitely. When you talk, it's like starting to, I don't know why it's doing that. Like after you talk for a few seconds, I don't hear it anymore. But
I don't know what it is. But
is your sound? Hold on. Is your sound going through your AirPods or through the computer?
No, I think it's Mark. When he's talking and then we talk, it doesn't cancel out the noise through his microphone end.
So just not talk.
No, I guess just be mindful of not talking at the same time. So what were you going to say, Mike?
No. Well, I just wanted to bring it back to Kindle. So, I guess a lot of questions that we get for people with Kindle is like, what should I expect? When should I expect to make money with Kindle? And it's kind of a hard answer to give, because I think a lot of it does have to do with the execution, and right, because in the beginning, the books that you make may not be great. You may not, your list may not be that good. So what kind of was your trajectory over the 5 years, 6 years of you publishing?
I'm pausing before I speak. See that?
You're good.
That's perfect.
When I started, it was a completely different business, right? The thing with Amazon is everybody, well, to whatever degree is, it's less the Wild West than it was, but even 5 years ago, it's still the Wild West. And every year they were making massive changes to their algorithm, right? As they're trying to figure out the business. And even now that's still ongoing, So the way I do the business now is much different than what I did before. But what I would say, generally speaking, is, and again, this is obvious stuff, but you talk about, before you were talking about professional athletes, right? And they will all say fundamentals, boom, boom, boom. That's what it's about, right? So same thing with these basic things. Your mindset is absolutely the key. You don't get into Kindle being I hope this works. You're this is going to work. Obviously, that's why I'm doing it, because it's going to work. Mm-hmm. So, that was my mindset. This is going to work. It's obvious, especially you said your people are romance, right?
Yeah.
So romance is, I don't even know what the percentage is, but it's a huge effing percentage of books that are sold. The market is there. Every time there's a fluctuation in the algorithm, which even right around now, there's been a little bit of one, because this is typically the time of year. And anytime I freak out, because, wherever you are with your income, if you're making $1 million instead of 2 million, you're like, oh my God, so it's all relative, right? So when everything starts, I always remember the market is there, it's there. The money is there. The pot of gold. Romance is not going anywhere. I don't want to say sex sells, but sex sells. There's a reason, or connection, or whatever it is, that happy ending, the happily ever after, I should say. Yeah, right. So for me, the main thing, but now one thing is consistency. You've got to be consistent with putting stuff out, because, every time you're putting something new out, it's putting people back into your funnel, you could say, back into your catalog, keeping you relevant. You've also got to be constantly experimenting. Don't be afraid to try different things and to test things out, and quality is more important than ever. It used to be, you could do, when I started, you would do, like, we did these little and the other thing I'm going to say, there's a million ways to do the business. You look up the most, even in romance, the weirdest, craziest thing, and there's somebody who's like ranked at some ridiculous, you're like, how the hell are they how are they top 100 with that? But there's just weird stuff. So, if you're following your North Star, right, which is something else I would say, like business, whatever, if you have that drive, like, this is what I want to be doing, then do it, and generally you want to also, though, you want to make sure you're following what's popular. This is not about like, oh, I really love robot Westerns. Like, those are robot Western happy, like, that's great, but nobody's fucking ever heard of them, or nobody's reading, like, to a degree, you want to be like, what's working? You want, success leaves clues, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, so I want to actually. Oh, there we go. There. I don't know why now it's happening to me. I don't know what's going on, but I want to go off of something that you said was, what the fundamentals are, and it seems to me that that's definitely something in online business that is in everything you do, whether it's you're building a blog, you're building a dropshipping store, everything, or you're doing a Kindle publishing, because everything we teach has fundamentals. And I think you're right that if your mind is not in the right place, it stops you from executing those fundamentals, even if you know what they are. And the other thing you said was experiment, but when you and test new things. But when you're experimenting and you're testing new things, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're still doing it within the realm of those fundamentals. You're just finding different ways to execute on them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, by fundamentals, like, mindset never goes out of style. Again, I keep on talking about Tony Robbins, but it's just because, it's not him. He just he's distilled a lot of stuff that everybody says. He's just the one who says it the loudest. So I always think of him, But one of his great examples is, he's like, when I was in race car school, they teach you when you're about to go into a skid in the corner, you look at the wall. He's like, first thing I teach you, look into where you want to go. You got to look in, because you will go where your focus is, right? So when you're like going to crash, don't look at the wall. Like, if you're freaking out, don't look at, oh, it's not going to work. You be like, how can I make this work, right? You have to keep your mindset, have your goals. Like, what are your goals? Go over your goals every day, right?
Right. Well, what I was talking about, what I said, fundamentals mainly, and someone just asked this question in the chat, was saying, they said, what are you doing to make Kindle work for you? Your mindset is not helpful. Also, he says quality is not even half the equation, because you brought up quality. He says, just look at curse word journals and coloring books. I think, because I actually have coloring books on Kindle that I put out like in 2014 that still make money. The quality is not necessarily the best. When we're talking about fundamentals, what we mean, and sorry to cut you off, Mark, because this does actually go back to mindset, is that we give people, when people join our courses or whatever, we basically give people the fundamentals, the steps that they need to take. But when they're taking those steps, it's like giving someone a map. When you're walking in the woods and you're trying to follow the map, you're going to see things like, oh, there's a rock over there, or things that are not necessarily drawn on the map, because it's impossible to capture every little detail on a map. But where mindset comes in is about, so say you were going to put out curse word journals and you were following one of the fundamentals that Mark said about success leaves clues and following the market, you can execute a high quality curse word journal or coloring book.
So right. So let me just first address the comment or whatever. Like I said, there's a million ways to do this business, and if it's working for people, great. Like there's absolutely somewhere in there, I suppose, for, just get a book out there every month. And it doesn't even have to be that great. I'm sure people are still making money with that, so if that's working for you, awesome. Like I'm not telling anybody that they have to do, but if you're asking me what works for me, what's worked for me is, but I'm also, I'm looking at being a bestseller. You know what I mean? I'm not looking like you have to have quality. I'm not looking at just getting, I don't know what would be successful that's not quality, because I'm not in anything but romance. I don't do those. But so I'm just saying, for me, quality is important, and I'm not going to change my view on that. But maybe for somebody else, but maybe somebody else it's not. Sorry, what?
Mark, we never talked about this, but we've talked about this a lot to people that listen. So I guess we started Kindle around the same time, around 2015-ish. And yes, back then it was like the wild, wild west. We'd all put out these small little 8 to 10K books. And so this is kind of when you started. This is what you were doing, right, in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, some of the books we would put out would just be absolute trash. And to me back then, what I would see is it didn't really matter what was in the book. Like what mattered was, I don't know, there would just be some things, sometimes like we would connect, everything would work together in a way where it would just cause a spike in the algorithm. Like people would go to it. People would buy it for whatever reason. It wasn't the inside of the book.
It worked at the time.
Yeah. So that's what it was back then. And then as things progressed, Kindle has tried to do away with that, especially in the fiction genre, through the way they count page reads probably, and just how the algorithm works, right? They're always changing it. So you're right. The quality now is extremely important. And what we mean by quality in terms of fiction is it actually being a legitimate good book, because that is what is going to impact your page reads. That's what's going to impact your ranking. And therefore more people are going to find it organically, and it's going to be a snowball from there. So yes, quality for some things doesn't matter, but quality could also mean the cover. It could also just mean how good your description is. And all of these things relate to the market. All these things relate to how well the readers will respond. So there's no objective view of quality. It's just what the market wants at that particular time.
Like if there is a place where it's like, hey man, just put out, I don't want to say garbage or whatever, like, great, show me where it is and I'll do it and I'll make the money, because we're all here just to make money. I can only speak from my own experience. And in my experience, that's what has been doing well. It's quality.
I think what Rocket Jams was, Rocket Jams with this question was clearly asking for like specific, like what specifically are you doing with Kindle or what can I do specifically that's going to take me to the top? And then he's saying that quality can't matter because you have these curse word journals, these low content books, and these coloring books.
Yeah. Then I'd study whatever niche you're in, what are the people that are being successful? What are they doing?
And mindset.
Because there is something to be said that there's people that might be pushing their garbage, and I'm saying, they're garbage, but, if you ever read, what's E.L. James's, that book, 50 Shades, right? Not a well-written book, you know what I mean? But they did something right. So, and there's a lot, and there's plenty of ones you can look at, they're getting pushed by Facebook ads, so it's like they're getting seen, and apparently being seen is more important. What I would advocate is you want to be seen, but you also want to have high quality. Like, why not take off as many things as you can, but it's up to people to also look at, just like what you're saying, to weigh out, because the other aspect is, right, you want to be thinking about the 80-20 rule all the time, right? Or 20-80, however you want to look at it. You want to be putting your effort toward the thing that is going to have the most impact. So, you mentioned, okay, you got description, you've got covers, you got, you want to look at them all and you want to sort of be like, all right, what's most important, and where, I mean, if you don't want to do all of them, but like I said, I think it comes down to experimenting. I mean, the other thing that's totally essential is that you want to be I mean, this is obvious, but you need to be in a mastermind with people, even beyond just being in your guys' group. Grab a couple of other people that are at the same level as you. And again, you want to make sure, and this is pretty effing obvious, but people will skip this, but it's like, you want people that you feel are giving as much as you're giving. It doesn't work if you're in one with like takers or, and, you can, and you're all there just to help each other, that's been essential for me also.
Well, out of those things you mentioned, so we'll say the quality of the book, the internal quality, the cover, and the description, maybe reviews. What would you say is the 80-20, or which one is the most important in your opinion?
Honestly, at this stage, at least at the level, and not that I'm at some whatever level, but where I'm at, you have to be nailing all of them, Mm-hmm. Like you have to be putting time into everything.
Are you cracking top 100 all Kindle these days?
No, I wouldn't say I'm not quite there. Not top 100.
Mm-hmm. Do you do Facebook ads at all, or are you doing just straight list stuff? Okay.
I do.
Yeah, we've gotten pretty close to. We've gotten into top 100 a couple times.
I mean, I think I've probably gotten in a few times, but I'm not consistently.
Yeah. It's definitely. We can definitely get into top 100 romance pretty consistently with box sets. If we're pushing all the buttons again, it is so strange how it's like every time you put up something, it's like a conglomerate. It's like a checklist, right? It's like a launch checklist. If you did this right, you did this right, you did this right, you put on the ads, you send out the book to your list, then it just blasts off. And I think for one, having a mastermind helps because each book that is launched is an experiment and it yields information. So if you're masterminding with people and you're all on the same level and you're all putting out books, now you can collectively see what worked with this person's book, what worked with this person's book. And now you can all iterate off that and see how the results.
Absolutely. But also, sorry, I spoke over.
Good.
Absolutely. Also, but again, it feeds back into your drive and your momentum and your, this can be, I don't want to say an isolating business, but you can get wrapped up in your own little cocoon. It's really, to me at least, it's really important to be working with other people, and it keeps me motivated. And not to mention just sort of being like, you have your weekly mastermind. You're like, all right, what are you going to do for next week? What everybody have going around. And, I'm big on groups in general, right? It's just, I think because you learn from each other, and that goes for like the healing or mindset work as well. Like you're learning from each other. Whenever one person works, everybody works. And same thing when people are bringing issues to a mastermind for Kindle.
Yeah. And it does. I'm so focused on this question. I'm sorry, because I just want to make sure that, because it's funny, when we were talking beforehand, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to play devil's advocate to the mindset stuff. But then when I see someone, talking shit about, oh, the mindset is not that helpful, I know it is the most important thing at the end of the day, because you named all the things that were important. Mike did the cover, the description, blah, blah, blah. And you have to come back. You're going to sit down on your computer, see what went wrong, what went right, talk to your mastermind group, assess, everything that happened with your last release, maybe your last couple months of releases. And at the end, it's really not that, like, it's not rocket science. Well, but at the end of the day, you have to sit down and be in the frame of mind to, like, actually do it. And that can be the most difficult part, especially over a long period of time.
Yeah, well, I would also, I don't know what you said, Rocket Man or whatever, whatever,
Rocket science.
Whoever it was, right? That, no, I mean the comment. That the other thing though is that everybody's in a different place, and it's very, what I said might not resonate or might be totally useless for a lot of people. That's totally fine. Everybody is in a different place and needing a different next tool. And maybe that person has their mindset like nailed down. I don't know, and maybe for them, they do need more strategies or whatever, like my focus is on more like big picture stuff or whatever, and so, that's fine. Sorry, what was the second part? I just wanted to address that. So.
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. We have to all be quiet. Mike.
When you work with people, Mark,
yeah,
you're sitting down with them. Maybe you're sitting down with a group, and what are you having them do? If you can shed a little bit of light on that.
Well, first I light a lot of candles and we hold hands. No, I'm kidding. No, not at all. So yeah, I mean, if I work on one-on-one with somebody, whatever, usually I'll have them give me an intake ahead of time. Like, I want to know what's the problem. Like, what are you dealing with? What are the problems? Right. And then I'll be like, what are the first times? What does this remind you of? When has this happened? What other ways has this sort of showed up? I'm going to not use the word manifest because it's got a, some people like manifest, but what other ways has this shown up in your life? And again, like I said, everybody's not at the point where they're interested. And, for me, generally when people get to the point, like they've tried everything else, nobody is like, it'll be, some people actually want to like just explore, but for the most part, it's because they've already bashed their head against the wall a bunch of times. They're like, something's not working. Like, I don't know what it is. I've tried everything, because it takes a lot to motivate you to be willing, because ultimately it means looking at things that are not going to be comfortable. That's my experience, and so, but they're more uncomfortable not looking at the things that are uncomfortable than they are to just finally get over it, so basically I'll have them bring up whatever it is. We'll sort of zoom in on what the things are. And that's where I sort of go through that process that I worked with you guys on before, right? Where basically what we're wanting to do is there is, people, you can put it any way you want, but there is, you could say, an emotional charge around different memories people might have, so with that guy, for instance, I worked with before, and by the way, some people have no idea what it's going to be, but it becomes clear when we work, but they really don't know. That's part of what happens, which is weird, but it starts to come into focus, So sometimes I'll have them doing like the tapping stuff, like what we were doing, right? Which is hitting these different, what do you call the nerves in your face, I should know the name, but it's hitting those, sort of sending a calming signal. So I'll bring them into the thing that is sort of triggering for them or painful for them, or the frustration, or I'll just be like, how do you know you suck so bad at Kindle? And I'll kind of purposely poke them a little bit, but it's to help them. It's to bring up that frustration, because ultimately we want to clear it away. And I know there's nothing wrong with them. I know they're not broken. I know they're not dumb. I know that you could just say that there's a program running at a deeper level, So we'll bring it up, and then I might be like, okay, let this go, we do whatever. We do that thing. Or I might just be like, hey, what'd you do this weekend? Or like, when's the last time, you're with that hot chick you were telling me about it? Something to knock them out of that state that they're in, like, actually, it's funny. It makes me think of, again, Tony Robbins, right? But he has a special on Netflix that came out a while ago. And I remember seeing some back when Netflix had comments still, or reviews. And somebody was like dissing him in the comments. And they're like, oh, what an idiot, man. There's some guy. And basically one of the people who's working with, it's in the promo, is a guy who basically says, I'm suicidal. Like, I came as like last resort, whatever, And he's talking to him, and and the guy's like, I don't know if he's sobbing. In my mind, he's like sobbing, he's upset, whatever. And Tony goes up to him and he goes, well, it's not your red shoes, right? And the reviewer's like, what an asshole. He like talks about his red shoes, like how insensitive, whatever. But that wasn't accidental. He's purposely trying to knock the guy's like reticular activating system, right? He's trying to knock his focus and change his state, right? Because that guy's just digging himself his own, he's stuck in that place. So what happens is, if I bring someone into a place that's, you could say, painful or challenging, And then I bring them to somewhere that's really happy and really good, which I did a little thing with you guys the other day, and then I'm like, okay, now take that, feel how awesome that is, and now send it to the other thing. And they're like, how do you feel now? You're like, oh, I feel different, right? Again, it's not rocket science either. You're basically just sort of evening out or knocking, I don't know of a better way to say it, but you're knocking down the charge, and it's the other thing, it's not a logical thing. It's not about talking about it. You can tell somebody, there's another famous skit from Bob Newhart from years ago where the woman it's a little comedy skit. The woman walks in and she's like, oh, I'm really upset. I've got this horrible problem. And he basically, it's build up and he says, well, don't do that, and that's the whole skit. He's like, well, just don't stop it. Stop doing that. Stop being upset. Stop having this problem. Obviously, if people could just stop having their problems, it wouldn't be that difficult, right? So it's not about just talking about things. I can talk to somebody all day, nothing will change. It's about doing, whether it's a tapping, or I might be like, let me see your best dance move. Get up, do a dance move. So you get them to go in between being in this, you could say painful or frustrated state, and then being in like an awesome or amazing state. And every time they go back to that challenge state, they're dragging a little bit of that awesomeness back, and it's no longer so painful. And that's how you can deal very effectively with traumas, the worst things you can imagine, and so that would be, and then after we've sort of knocked down, because the other thing is that if somebody has a problem, it's not going to be from one thing generally. Those are the easiest, like, oh, I saw my cat get hit by a car when I was, 20 and I'm upset about it. Great, easy, right? That's not that, I don't want to say it's not that hard, but that's pretty easy to work on. But it's the what they call little t trauma, like daily dealing with things, but let's say somebody might have 4 or 5 big references, like that guy, he got fired, failed in 4 or 5 businesses. So we would address each one until he feels a lot better. And then in the end, I lead him through what we didn't really do it, but what's called future pacing, which is basically, and it involves this little bit of like a hypnosis kind of thing. And there's a lot of different parts that are brought in, but you're basically, it's sort of like a guided to seeing yourself successful, and you're creating what would call like an anchor point. You're creating a connection because we all have that potential. It's just, we might keep on telling ourselves this story of, and it's always a story, right? The story of how, oh, I suck at this, or this isn't working. So we kind of want to knock that down and then build up the story of the successful you,
Yeah, it seems
it's a practice, I would say. That's what I meant by fun. It's a practice, like you can make big changes, but the more you work on that, the more you can ingrain this new state of being.
It seems like to me, like that new, I'll wait for the sound to go away. Yeah, it seems like that new, I don't know if it's new, but that thing that's kind of talked about now, like the MDMA therapy, where like under a professional setting, they give them
MDMA, like taking MDNA.
Yeah, like for people with PTSD, they'll give them MDMA, and then it'll reframe the whole trauma, and then they can talk about it in a way that that then when they're back to normal, it doesn't have the charge that it normally does. So
right.
Yeah, it all seems like the same stuff, like you were talking about with with Tony Robbins talking about the guy's shoes, is that you're trying to navigate someone out of their old patterns.
Yeah, ultimately, when we're stuck in whatever our pattern is, and it can be about anything, it could just be an opinion, like, oh, this is the way it is, and it's just this way, and I say so, and, ultimately they're all just patterns, but to us, this is how it is, and there is no other way it could possibly be, and a lot of people, if you've had these traumas, they can't even imagine that they could feel differently about it, and what I would say is that you actually can, you can shift everything, it's about what is your perspective, which is based upon what you hold inside of yourself, what's happened to you previously,
Yeah, I think you articulated it really well, like with the, how people dig themselves into these routines, and you can do these pattern interrupts like Tony Robbins did with the shoes. Like if anyone's seen that Netflix documentary, Tony Robbins was like, your shoes, they're friggin' ugly. And the guy's like, like sobbing in this, suicidal state. And he's like, what? And then that's how Tony Robbins knows he has them. He broke the pattern of that, and now he can reinforce something different over that. But that's
waiting for Mind you, though, what is important, you have to maintain rapport, right? Because you know what I'm saying. Well, but that's an important aspect. Like you have to have a sense of like where the person is at, and you could really, you're not just going to be like, get over it, or hey, laugh, like you need to be with the person. So, it's definitely an art to a degree,
I'm not saying try this at home and just, go with people that are upset and say, your shoes suck. Obviously, he knew what he was doing in that moment. That he had,
but I just want to,
the end to do that. Yes, you're right, though.
No, I just want to say it for the perspective of like, I'm sure there's people listening that like, I have no idea what they're thinking. Just trying to, imagine like, well, that sounds pretty insensitive. And, so, it does sound insensitive if you have to understand that he's doing it. Hopefully he's maintaining rapport. He knows where he's going. He's going to come back to them once they're out of it, and when he feels it's appropriate, he'll give them the attaboys or whatever. And which I think he does in the end with that guy, where he's like, you're amazing. You've done a great job. I'm so proud of you.
So I want to talk about this. So how do you feel like it does all these things we talked about do relate to the manifestation stuff, where, there's a whole camp of people that say, if you just think positive and, just write down what you want to do, then these things will naturally come to you. What's your input on that?
That's it. I think what I would say is not knowing the audience. So, it depends on
your opinion.
No. But my interest is not in stating my opinion necessarily. My interest is like trying to put it in a way that makes sense. You know what I mean? Just saying stuff like, oh, well, blah, blah, if it doesn't land, then it's just me talking, So the way I approach all that kind of stuff, or the way I should say I started approaching all of it, as I was like, is this harmful to think this way? Is it actually beneficial, whether or not it's true? Right? Like, does it make me just feel good to believe this? Maybe that's enough sometimes, right? Or like, this seems a little, I don't know if I can get on board with this, but you know what? It's not hurting me. And if it's true, awesome. But even if it's not true, I can see how this could be helpful, So I just want, like, that's how I started approaching those kinds of questions. I mean, I've been doing it a long time, so now I'm way fucking down the rabbit hole. You know what I mean? But so what I would say is, well, so the whole movie, The Secret, right? Which a lot of people are probably familiar with or heard of, right? The issue of The Secret, just think positive, everything's going to work out. In my experience, if it was just about how you thought, then everybody would be a millionaire or whatever, But that's where I would say it's not just, that's a very small part of the wholeness of you. Like what you're manifesting is a reflection, not just of what you're thinking. It's a reflection of everything throughout your whole being, right? Or on a more practical level, you could say there's a lot of subconscious stuff going on besides what you're consciously thinking of, Like there's a lot of people that they're all the time like super positive, but you're like, I don't really buy it because they're a fucking shit show, like they're talking more to themselves than to anybody else, trying to talk themselves out of how negative they actually feel deep inside. You know what I mean? And I used to be like that to a large degree. Like, like I don't want to hear anything negative, because really a lot of me was like, yeah, they're right. Things suck, So it's a matter of being aligned with whatever you're trying to create throughout everything. And so what I mean by that, so that's where the kind of stuff that I would do at a deeper level, all that, everything, all your memories, all your feelings, all the things that are a deeper part of you, they need to be aligned with that success as well, So yeah, your thinking in the moment is important, and writing down goals is certainly helpful, This is the analogy I always think of for that one. If you imagine that you've got a motorboat, I think I said this, you got a motorboat, whatever, sitting out in the water. It's got two huge 250s on the back, 500 horsepower total for this thing. if you have absolutely no baggage, nothing, if you're totally aligned with, success, you just push that throttle, boom, you're gone. You're going to crush it. You're going to do amazing stuff, right? But most of us have got at least one anchor into the bottom, right? And that anchor might just be somebody who is like, money doesn't grow on trees. Or, if you're wealthy, you got to be an asshole, right? Or everybody knows it's evil somehow to make money. Like, oh, those Wall Street guys are horrible, right? Those are anchors into the ground. Those are basically negative beliefs and judgments. So if you have enough of those, I don't care if you have 1,000 horsepower behind you, you're not going to go anywhere. You're just going to burn yourself out. You're going to burn out your motor. You're going to be frustrated. You're going to be angry, right? So, but also you can, if you have enough horsepower, you can overcome some anchors, but those are the people that'll have a heart attack at 35, because they're fighting themselves so much. So the idea is you want to be aligned with all of you for the success you're looking to create. That's my experience.
Yeah. And in my opinion, I mean, what do they say? Like 90% of what's going on is subconscious in our brains. So yeah, we're talking about all these things like at the practical level and like how, we can align ourselves like logically, but yeah, so much of this is going on just behind the scenes. So I share a lot of your opinion in that sense, with like the affirmation stuff and the manifestation stuff. That I also
want to say, hey man, if things are working for people, fucking awesome. Like my hat, awesome. Like go for it. Like, you don't need, everybody doesn't need to like, I mean, once upon a time I would have been like, oh, some people are pretty aligned, some people are like Tom Brady, like or like whatever demons they have, they can use their advantage and still create a pretty awesome life. And, but for people where it's like, I've been trying everything and I'm just getting frustrated. I know I'm not stupid. I know I can do this. I don't understand why it's not, ultimately that's what leads people to go a little bit deeper. I just want to be like, it's never like the first choice, it's never the first thing to be like, I think I'm going to start talking about manifestation, whatever. I mean, I don't know. At least not for me, it wasn't.
Well, it's kind of funny. I think it's kind of funny. I think for our cousin Jared, the manifestation and stuff actually came first before anything else. And you don't know who he is, but he's been on the show before, and I think that's his primary strength because, I mean, to be honest, like I think that's his main strength, like, because he's not like the most tech savvy person or like like anything else that people associate with success, like having an IQ of 10 million or having some special skill. He doesn't have any of that. He just believes that he's gonna like succeed at what he's doing, and no matter what he does, he just finds a way to do it. And
that's the most important. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there's tons of, I don't want to say brains has nothing to do with it, but really I don't see that as the most important thing at all. I mean, the people that I know who are most successful in my business, are basically, they had regular kind of jobs, housewives, and they are absolutely crushing it, and it's because of the attitude. It's the attitude and it's also, you could say, the alignment that they have with that success,
Yeah.
Yeah, like for him, that he was going to be successful. And it's not, it's not that he's great with Google Ads. It's not that he's great with anything in particular. It's just that this reticular activation system, there's nothing you could tell him that is going to dissuade him from getting to where he wants to go. And so if that's how your mind is, that's where you're going to get. You're going to find a way to get around those players and, get the point. So yeah, I wish we could have called him in and had him as like a guest for like 5 minutes. But I was
gonna say, there's another one of you. Like, how many?
He's not like us. No, I would say I brought up that question because I would say he is more in the camp of if you're just aligned and you're doing these things, that success will come to you. And like, in my opinion, like I said, I don't think it doesn't hurt to think like that. And I would say I have that thinking to some degree, but I think there are a lot of people that have that level of thinking, and maybe it prevents them from taking more physical action.
Because I think it's not necessarily just coming to you per se. I mean, I would also say it's like, the more like aligned you are, you could say, like when you're in that place of possibility and feeling excited about your business and feeling good, then when the idea comes, boom, you do it. Like you want to be acting on what they would call inspired action, and staying with that momentum also is very important. Like if you're afraid, like, I mean, lean into it, I mean, but that can be tricky because you can also be, a mess. I don't know, but you can only be working on yourself just so much, and sometimes the way you learn and the way you grow, in my experience, even when you're failing, you're succeeding. Like sometimes it takes the failure for you. That's where you had to go to learn the next thing you needed to create your success, and I'm not one of these people who's like, oh, it's awesome you kept failing, but what are you going to do? Give up? No. Like, you constantly are learning and you're like, okay, I learned something else. I mean, not to be obvious, but the whole creating the light bulb and the 10,000 filaments or however many Edison tried, like another way not to fucking make a light bulb.
I want to clarify something about the failing thing. And we're running pretty long on this show. Actually, a lot of people are tuned in, but more than usual. But one of the things about failing and being aligned and failing is, I think, knowing when you've failed at a particular thing and accepting that and actually being able to say, okay, I failed at this. If I keep going at this, it's not going to deliver what I want. And I think it's it's a bit of a nuanced distinction as to how to get there. So for example, when I first started an online business, I was doing Amazon FBA. Before Mike was doing Kindle, probably before you were doing Kindle, I was doing like Amazon FBA and like retail arbitrage or whatever. And we actually tried to do another FBA business last year, which you could say was a failure. We didn't actually like lose much money, but it, for the headache, it just didn't work out. So I think it's not only important to be aligned with like, oh, I'm going to be super successful, but to be aligned with like that failing is just part of the journey, and recognizing that if this is not working out the way you want it to, like you have to really be honest with yourself. Can we tweak this in a way where it's going to work the way we want it to, or should we take these learnings and apply it to something else? And I think it's a hard distinction to make, but I think an important one. I don't know who says this, but someone says if you fail fast and then keep going.
Yeah. I think that's one of those gut check things, like follow your gut, because I'm trying to think, like I've done I've done some Shopify stores and stuff like that, and ultimately I just couldn't, but part of it was also like, it just didn't excite me, even though like part of me would be like, this should be exciting. Like maybe some aspects did, or I don't know. I actually never in a billion years, if you had said, however many years ago, one day you're going to be publishing romance, I would have like laughed you in the face or punched you in the face, right? I just would have been like, fuck off, like you gotta be kidding. I don't know, but I think that is one of those gut check things, just sort of, you can only sense in, okay, is this me and something I can overcome? Is this about me? Or is this really just not happening? Like there have been certain kinds of romance that I had done that I was like, this just isn't happening. And also I do think it's important, there's a lot of things. One thing is the whole idea of like not doing a passion play. You know what I mean? Like for your first business, especially, like not thinking, okay, I'm going to make $1 million and save the world. Some people can do that. That's great. But sort of setting it up like, okay, this first one, I just want to make a bunch of money, But but you do also have to have some way that you feel connected to it to be successful. A little bit off different what you're saying, but I find that to be true. Like, I do get excited about the businesses that I do, even if they seem, like selling Clorox wipes or something like that. Like, you have to have a connection to that. Anyhow.
Well, you probably kind of at this point you probably have a connection to the process. Like, all the input. You kind of see you're kind of competing with the algorithm, competing with the other authors, and you kind of.
Well, I get into at this stage I write all the plots, and sometimes I do the writing from time to time, and not all the time because that's just not an awesome use of my time with all the things we're doing. But I find it, but I do to the degree that it's fun sometimes. Like I never thought of that as like a talent I had or something that would be cool, but I get into it. I'm like, oh, and then we'll do this, and then this will happen. I find it exciting. And some of the things I've stopped doing, it's because I couldn't find any way to get that same excitement. So I just didn't have the motivation, because I think you can be successful at anything really, but you have to find the drive. It's got to mean something to you, Yeah.
I really got to take a piss, and then we'll end the show or something.
That's fine.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. No, but Mark, Joe and I actually talk about that all the time. Doing the passion play, I think, can be detrimental a lot of the time because there's too much emotion wrapped up around it, and it just may not even be a good idea. So you're doing something, and you think that you're aligned towards it, and you're doing all the right things, but in reality, people have a limited amount of money, they have a limited amount of time, and so maybe that's just not what's going to work at that moment.
Well,
I'd rather something. Yeah.
I mean, you're also in a sense trying to like rub your head and pat your belly and stand on one foot at the same time, right? Like, and I think it's awesome. Like if people can do it, I think it's amazing, and some people can, I mean, I've had enough challenges that I kind of had to narrow down, all right, what can I handle at one time? Like it's already enough of a challenge for me, like to try to focus and overcome my particular blocks. I don't also need to take the weight on of like trying to save the universe, especially when it's clear to me that like the honeypot or whatever is over here, and that happens to be selling ballpoint pens, so maybe I should just get over myself, make the money selling ballpoint pens, and then actually with that success and with the fruits of that, I can play a little bit more of a passion play, And I would also say that a lot of the passion plays, again, we have a lot of stories, it's our story of like, oh, I'm saving the universe because of this or whatever. And I don't know if it makes people feel good, I mean, don't get me wrong. I like, I have lots of passion plays I'd like to do.
Yeah. I mean, I think also it's hard to know what you're passionate about, I think, before you've really done anything, because, doing romance Kindle books or doing drop shipping or, like any of the things that we do, was I passionate about it going into it? No, not really. But you cultivate interests, and I wouldn't say I'm passionate about those things, but like I enjoy doing them, and I can have passions that I go and I do later. With
it's also the whole, it's the whole find your why, right? Which is like constantly talked about. Your why might be I want to spend more time with my kids, or I want to be able to, like me, before this, like what did I do today? I don't know. I got up, I did some stock stuff, I went and played soccer and tennis, and then I was like, oh, I should get back. I did a little Kindle. That's how I want. So that's a motivator for me to be able to. I couldn't do that if I was working for the man, probably.
Yeah, I think it's better to keep passions as passions, because you're trying to, if you want to say you love pets, and so you're going to start up this pet accessory drop shipping store and all this because you love pets, you want to give to the pet world, and now you're actually, I think you're more likely to develop a negative association with that and lose passion for it, because it's not just about that you love pets, and now you have to learn how to upload products. You have to deal with customer service. And there's like all these negative things that are going to come up. And if you're trying to preserve this passion that you have, maybe it can drive you to actually make it into a legit business, or it may just ruin all the passion you feel because of all these other things you have to deal with you didn't think you had to deal with.
I mean, I think it's awesome if people can marry, if they can be successful at it, you know, but I think we're on the same page in the sense that I do often see people coming in who are conflating their like passion with the idea they want to work for themselves. And like every passion is not necessarily going to create an environment that you're going to be able to make a ton of money, you know, and whereas, you know, you just have to recognize like, you know, the market has to be there. And again, that's why I ended up initially I was actually going to do, shocker, like, oh, I'll do self-help books and a line, you know, and maybe I could have done fine with that. But then I saw a thing like just talking about how much money romance books make. And I was like, what am I trying to do right now? Make money. Okay, good. Easy decision, you know, at the time. So.
Yeah, I agree. Couldn't have said it any better. So you want to wrap it up, Joe?
Yeah, let's wrap it up here. It's getting kind of late. Interesting show. I mean, we a lot talking about Kindle, talking about mindset. We usually go through the comments at the end. You know, Rocket Jams. He says that
him and Nanex are having a little bit of a back and forth there, but
yeah. But I do want to comment on a few more things. I do want to comment on a few more things before we end the show, and then we'll end it. So he says that if you were to draw a map towards KDP success, quality might be a stop I'd sacrifice, at least at first. Seems like to me, first to market are way more valuable than KDP sales, and quality can be improved later. And I'd argue that all KDP bestsellers that are low quality were very likely first to market or near to the top. I would say that's absolutely wrong.
Wrong.
I didn't fully understand what he's saying, but look, my belief is like if I actually would talk, we'd probably be on the same page. It's hard to communicate in this way, you know. Like I think it's also very different if I was starting now than starting where I was. I've got the benefit of I've got a shit ton of back catalog. I've got, you know, it's very different. Like I would probably have a total. I mean, there's a million ways to do this business, and if somebody's making money, then more power to them, you know. And you know, I can only offer what's working for me, you know.
I think.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Mike.
I don't get the impression that this person is, you know, like he's made it work in his own way. I think he's trying to figure out how to make it work, and his idea is that being first to market is the way to go. And in my experience, I think we would all disagree with that.
And what I would say then, right. So then what I would say is that it's kind of too late to be, I mean, you're the one saying first to market, but it's like markets, it's getting saturated. You know, it's like there's a ton of people who know about this business, a ton of people doing it. The days where you could just publish anything and people would buy it, at least in my experience, you know, in the stuff that I do, those are long gone. You know, like now in my niches and the things that I do, you better be on your game, you know. And, you know, but having said that, there are so many different niches. So again, like I can't speak for somebody else's thing. I can only say what works for me. And if you're researching and you find some niche, you know, like there's some crazy shit. How many times have I said that? Like, and you're like, oh my God, there might be an opening in there somewhere for books that are not super great quality, that nobody's done, that's a new thing. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, you know?
I can speak to exactly what he's talking about, because I think he's talking about low content Kindle books. I don't want to say low quality, and being first to market in that is probably very important. So the way we actually got started, well,
what is that? That's the books that like I don't even know what that is. Like books that are blank, like a blank print book, or
like journals and coloring books and stuff?
Yes, that's what he's talking about. So, Mark, when we first started, I don't know, I think I did the coloring books before Mike did. Yeah. So, when I was doing Amazon FBA, the first digital publishing thing I ever did was put out a series of adult coloring books. And those are still for sale today. We actually did a whole video about how they pay for that Peloton bike with the royalties that I still get from like 2014.
Oh, nice.
But anyway,
Peloton, fancy.
the whole concept was that I was like one of the first to market with these adult coloring books, and there were other ones out there, but it was so hot and there were so few people doing it that like I put out like 5 books that were like
right.
It cost me like $100 maybe to make all these books if you account for everything, and I made like $10,000 like the second month I did it.
Awesome.
Now that if you were going to do adult coloring books today, which you certainly can, it's certainly a huge market, and you were going to do it sustainably, you would have to do it the way Mark is talking about and the way we're talking about. You have to come with high quality. You have to focus on building a strong back catalog. You have to focus on building your email list, your fan base. Now, if you want to go hunt around for all these tiny little niches, these up and coming niches, things like weird fitness journals, like, books like that, where it's like, I don't know, offshoots of crossword puzzles. Like there's all tons of stuff out there that you could do. And we actually recommend doing that kind of stuff if you have no money and you're able to make these books yourself on the cheap. But as far as a sustainable long-term way to do Kindle and to make, get into the top 100 and to do things, to do it into a sellable business and a sellable pen name, the way we're teaching, it's everything I think that we talked about today was on point, even though it may not have been that tactical, if you will.
Okay. I mean, I guess all that I can say then is that, and I'm not, for what I publish, I'll stand by what I said, but with that stuff, I don't have the experience, I can't really comment. That might very well be the best way to do it. But you have more experience and you seem to also say it's still quality,
I just wanted to clarify for the audience that we're talking about 2 kind of completely different approaches.
Right.
And I just wanted to make that
we do
distinction.
romance. You do romance, and it's about actually tapping into what's working rather than being first to market. That's like a rare thing. It's like a 50 Shades of Grey, it's a Twilight. Those are first to market huge hits. You're not going to have that ghostwriting, making Kindle books on randomly. So that's just the point we want to make.
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I was going to say, to have that, you probably also need, if you are going to be first to market in that sense of romance, you probably do need some sort of a few miraculous things to happen with press and stuff.
Yeah.
I think when he's talking about first to market, he's talking about weird niches like coloring books or curse word journals or something like that. Those are little tiny markets that pop up on Kindle or on Kindle paperback that you can, potentially do well with if you discover them first.
Yeah. We're not trying to rely on miracles.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, we're 93 minutes in. I guess let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
But that was a solid episode.
Okay. I hope that was helpful for anybody, people listening, if that's, So.
Yeah.
So
where can people find you, Mark?
I think, honestly, if people are on Facebook, I'm on Facebook. The only thing I'd say with that is send me a message. It'll come through as a message request because not that I'm so whatever, but I don't always, respond to friend requests if it's some random person. Or I think, my website, you guys said you're going to put it on there.
Yep.
So
Mark C. Vanderhoek or whatever. We'll link that.
That means I'm going to have to actually check that email more, I guess. Yeah.
And yes, if you want to
have my
get in touch with
assistant
Mark,
check it, but yeah. What's up?
Okay, yeah. Yes, if you want to get in touch with Mark, you can certainly do that. Also, we hope to have you inside the Elite Fleet. Maybe we can do a nice little group coaching session, depending on how many people are interested in there. So that would be awesome.
Yeah, can I say a word about that?
Sure.
Yeah, just that, and again, it's not for everybody, whatever. But if there are people that like just keep coming up against their shit, like they just really don't, like, if it's you, like, if you're having challenges or, and that's not everybody, like I said, God bless the people that are just crushing it. And, everybody doesn't need to, to go deep, whatever. But, I just think it can be pretty powerful because we don't realize we get so trapped in our own perspective and our own way of being that it is, like I was saying, it's like a goldfish in a bowl, where you say, hey, how's the water? And they're like, what water? What are you talking about, water? Like we don't even realize how trapped we are in this. We think we're seeing things clearly and objectively, but we're not at all. None of us sees objectively. We see our little tiny slice of how things are. But we think, oh, I'm right. That other guy, he's the idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah,
so,
I think everyone has that to some degree.
So everybody has all degrees, honestly. Like
yeah, sure.
I mean, it's just there's different things that are more common that people would agree upon. But anyhow, whatever. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for staying. For nearly 2 hours. And
yeah, it's kind of like, gee, I wonder how long this goes. Cool, whatever.
We just kept going, but so people can connect with you. We'll link that down below, and hopefully we'll see you soon inside the Elite Fleet. And thank you guys.
And thank you so much. I'm always happy to talk about what I do and whatever, healing or how to transform. To me that stuff's interesting.
Yeah. So we'll disconnect from the live now, but Mark, you can stay with us for now. But thank you to everyone watching, and as always, take it easy.